We'll record in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Truth podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend, Dr. Jeffrey Smith. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Jim. Hey, Paul.
And our very special guest, Paul Diamond, live from Peru, joining us for what we hope and will not even hope, what we know will be a very deep dive into a very powerful topic about our fields. And when we talk about our field, we're talking about the quote unquote body of energy that we carry, the all of us, that is all of us, that is the place where we experience all the things we experience. It's the place where we also tend to store things that may not be as healthy for our experience as we might like it to be. But I know there will be many definitions or good definitions of it. But what we're focusing on today is really how to go about actually being able to change what's happening in our field, being able to consciously locate it and put attention to it, and figuring out how do we begin to dissipate or change or shift those emotional, mental intensity, traumas, things that end up staying stuck in our field, that don't allow us the fullest expression of our joy or the fullest expression of who we are. And we're excited to have Paul here. Paul is, as many of you who have listened before have met Paul via this podcast. He has an amazing center down in Peru, in the Sacred Valley, called Tantrea, and he is an Ayahuascero, is a master of walking us through the plant experience, the plant-based medicine experience, among many, many, many other things, and offers a lot of incredible life-changing experiences related to and not related to plant medicine. So we're very happy to have you here again, Paul, and especially on this incredible topic that I think you will have a ton of good things to add to, as well as Jeff and myself. So we're excited that you're here. And I'm going to kick it off, if you don't mind, since we were kind of talking about this a little before we got on. Recently, we Jeff had a very big download about a process which we're calling the death pose right now. Through the process of my doing that process and learning it, I had a very powerful experience of a self-immolation release, which was driven off a desire to sort of release this sort of long feeling, standing sort of self-abuse process. And I don't mean physically hurting myself, but more internally, internally abusing myself. And it evolved, and it has evolved into this thing here now where it's sort of in my bronchioles, and I have a lovely cough and a lot of production and all that good stuff. And we were talking about how working in the field it's so important that once you tap into some energy field or some baggage in that field, that gets released completely and doesn't just migrate from one area of the body to another because the ego reattaches, or you allow yourself to become emotionally invested in whatever it was you were trying to let go of. So I'm going to ask you all to go on a deep dive with us. And is everybody ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Right, let's do it. So I've kind of laid out the basics of my situation here, and would love to hear, Paul, I know you had some things you wanted to bring to that conversation. So
yeah, thank you, Jim. So of course various things come up with regards to this. I think firstly it's good to recognize, of course, that many of the ancient cultures of the world had very sophisticated topographies of the soul, let's say, very sophisticated sort of maps of the interior territory and the various bodies, various energies that go to make us up in our entirety. That they have quite useful maps. Of course, they don't always correlate with each other. But, as Alan Watts said, the map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. So don't get confused by the maps. Still, it's good to recognize that these maps are there and that they do provide us with a useful working methodology if we begin to have a kind of a cross-cultural kind of methodological approach, where we're looking across the board and seeing what is similar, and, you know, what can we say is kind of general around these things. You know, we can certainly say that, you know, there is a recognition of the various levels of a human being, from the physical level all the way up to the sort of grand cosmic, or, you know, even sort of, you know, the whole kind of understanding of reality, as it were. So when we're talking about the field, I think firstly we need to be careful or clear about our definition and what it is that we're pointing towards, with reference perhaps to these ancient world texts or maps, in order to give us some kind of GPS around where we are in this sort of territory, because the field, of course, can be a very vague term for somebody just encountering it. I think it's good to be able to be a little bit clear about what it is that we're talking about in that regard, and then we can talk about, you know, how we can move energy through it or out of it, or, you know, what needs to be done with it within that you know, perspective.
Cool. So how would you, in the work that we're describing and the things that we are dealing with, what would you define that field? What are we impacting?
Well, I think, you know, from what I understand of what you've expressed, I think that you are working at various levels. I think that you're working at the emotional body level. You know, the emotional body not necessarily being a, you know, with all of these bodies, we're not necessarily talking about things with anthropomorphized form. You know, we're talking about more constellates of, you know, how energy relates, or how energy is experienced, let's say. So of course we understand that there is an emotional body, and it's not necessarily contained within some kind of shell, but actually, of course, the emotions flow through the peptides and through the, you know, the sort of, you know, interior structure of the body, as such, you know, kind of psychoneuroimmunological kind of fashion. Mm-hmm. So the emotional body kind of runs everywhere. So it's definitely working on the emotional body, the kind of work that you're talking about. I suspect that, of course, it is always going to have an impact on the mental body, and that there's going to be some kind of process with regarding how the energy is being released, and also perhaps some kind of vision or insightful memory of what that particular energy is as it's being released, as it were. And I think, of course, it's going to have an impact in the long run, perhaps on the physical body as well, and, you know, deeply held traumas within the body, and, you know, injuries and things of this nature, you know, they're going to get kind of released at some point. What I suspect is not necessarily happening is not necessarily moving through the other bodies necessarily. So it's getting caught up within the lower kind of vibrational structures, you know, in this case, the kind of the physical body. Energy is always, of course, trying to transmute from lower frequency structures into higher frequency structures. You know, that's the nature of alchemy. That's the nature of transformation, and the universe is a, you know, an alchemical machine, as it were. So it's always trying to shift energy into higher forms. So if it's getting stuck at these kind of lower levels, it means that there's kind of like processes that need to go on, you know, to free up some space above it, as it were, and to give some kind of fire underneath it also, in order to be released. In the Taoist system particularly, they work with two sort of forms of energetic release. There is the fire methods. The fire methods work with very kind of, you know, quite strong methodologies, perhaps using the breath, perhaps using quite a fiery kind of cathartic kind of experience, as it were. You know, perhaps very deliberately moving energy along certain channels and kind of pushing it in some way. And then there is the opposite way, which is the water method. And the water method always works really with melting, and kind of, yeah, melting through these energetic constrictions. And that melting tends to take place on kind of like actually many different bodies, many different levels of energetic manifestation, until it's able to clear at all of those kinds of levels as it kind of melts and dissipates that particular energetic block.
That's really awesome, and again, interesting, because it's one of the things that we used in the workshop. It's something that I've been doing for quite a while in my own meditation, in wanting to understand how I'm clearing and moving things out of my field. One of the visualizations that I do in my meditation is that I visualize myself in the middle of this giant sun, and I take in the fire and I breathe the fire through my entire field and allow the fire to clear out any debris, to just vaporize whatever is there.
This is absolutely a fire method.
Yeah. And what I recognized the other day was that I had been using it in sort of a general sense, but I hadn't thought to try to actually expand the energy around my bronchioles and go there specifically and begin to open that up. Because then once I do that, then the second phase that I've been doing is to then embody the white light and do the same, breathe it through my entire experience and sit. It's gone to a place now where I'm the observer of the process, so I can see me igniting the little white ball of outside, and then I expand that ball and expand that and expand it and expand it until it feels like I've done as much as I can in that moment, and then let it go. So that's really extraordinary as a way of describing it. Now I'm curious, is there some way I can use that more effectively, and can I be more specific? Can I be more specific in focusing it, or do you not? Is it not a very good idea to start meddling in that?
Well, no, it's a good question, Jim, and my advice would be twofold. Firstly, when there is already some kind of precondition, for example, the cough that you have at present, I would avoid doing very strong fire methods, and I would definitely avoid constellating further too much energy of a fire-based nature in and around the area of your chest.
Okay.
It can lead to further stagnation. In your case, it will lead to pretty severe damp heat. That can lead to some fairly unpleasant lung conditions. So best to avoid constellating the energy in that area in this particular case. And I would work again on instead on the kind of the fire method in this particular case. Work on kind of like melting through, kind of visualizing, or feeling is more appropriate. In fact, visualization can of course stimulate sensation, which can be useful. So bringing your awareness to the kind of the stuck feeling in the lungs or the heavy feeling in the lungs, constellate it as an energetic form. Feel its shape, feel its texture, as it were, and then literally feel it as a cube of ice, and just allow your awareness, which of course is the ultimate alchemical agent. Really, anytime we bring awareness to something, that's what's actually transforming it. We use different tools. We use the breath, and we bring awareness to the breath, or we're using the mantra, or we're using body focus, and whatever it may be. But the real agent of change is awareness in that particular case. We can work with these kind of subtle visualizations or kind of sensory kind of ways to grasp hold of it, as it were. But we recognize ultimately awareness is doing the change, by bringing awareness to whatever it may be, whether it be trauma or stuck energy or sickness or whatever it is. Automatically a process of change and transformation happens in that area, as long as we're not grasping after the result of that particular change. We're not looking for, we want this to change. If you get into that kind of cycle, then of course you just perpetuate the type of energy that's constellated there in the first place. So instead you just relax there with a very equanimous, very calm, very kind of relaxed mind, and you just literally just allow the energy just to drop down through those constellated energies and just melt them and diffuse them and disperse them in a very gentle kind of fashion, perhaps again and again and again, just melting around the outside of it and getting a little bit more, and then melting more and more until you're melting it down like an ice cube down to excuse me, down to nothingness. That's what pile of water, as it were.
So would you say that I am by nature fire? I'm a Leo. I have fire all over my chart. I'm fire in every direction you can think of. For me, is it a better? I always gravitate there, obviously.
Yeah, you will do, of course.
And what I'm hearing that actually I should stick more with the water element in that experience?
Yes, I would say for you personally, Jim. Yes, certainly in this particular case, yeah, we tend to, unfortunately, to gravitate towards what we are imbalanced in. You know,
Yeah.
we tend to gravitate towards that more, you know, so
Okay.
best to kind of like at least pull it back to some kind of neutral or central point, which in your case, of course, would be, yes, to begin to focus more on the water-based practices in order to, you know, bring about a more kind of a holistic or balanced nature, as it were, certainly.
Awesome. That's very helpful. And for
Mm.
those listening, I'm hoping that you're following along with, you know, what we're talking about here is how to kind of access your own field. And I'm trying to give as much information about detail of how I see it or how I feel it, and listening to Paul's responses, so that you as the listener can also reflect on that in your own personal experience. So you can see that there are, you know, with earth and air and fire and water, you have those intense components as a part of the personality that expresses. And you know, I know, you know, my spouse is all air all day, every day, you know, he's an air sign, and he's air through and through. So
Mm.
it's important. It's always interesting to see how fire and air interact with each other, but as a part of a healing process and a part of a change process within the field, how important it is to utilize the contrast, or the thing you wouldn't gravitate to necessarily. So where air would probably go to earth before it would go to fire, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's
so
deeper levels to it. Actually, I would say there's an even deeper level. You see, when we're talking about these constellated samskaras, when we're talking about these heavenly, impactful, emotional, or whatever type of energy it is that, you know, sticks, as it were, the way that they are in fact manifesting at a very, very deep root level is via, in fact, the elements. They manifest via the four elements. So when you get down very, very deep inside the body with your awareness, you are able to, of course, well, in the beginning, the process is that you can feel only very kind of gross, you know, very large structures in the body, perhaps structures that have a lot of pain or discomfort in some way. They're the only parts of our body that are available to our awareness, that are available to our consciousness. Otherwise, we don't really pay any mind to the body, so we don't really have any awareness of it. And when we begin to, or become aware of it, or choose to become aware of it, in the beginning, yeah, very gross, very heavy, big energies, or, you know, the whole of the thigh, perhaps, but nothing more subtle and nothing more distinguished than that. And then as you begin to develop in awareness, and you begin to drop that awareness into deeper and deeper levels of the body, you begin to feel more and more stuff happening, vibration and itching and buzzing, and, you know, and all of this kind of thing. And you can drop down behind that level, down to the level of the kind of the vibration of the cells even, and the cellular metabolism in your awareness, you know, again, kinesthetically, you know, still on a feeling, touch-based sensory level. And then you're able to penetrate really underneath that, down to the basic elements, you know, as described by the great mystical traditions of the world, you know, 5 elements in the realm of the Chinese and kind of Tibetan traditions, and the 4 elements in the kind of the Western tradition. And what you find is that the kind of vibration down at that level manifests as very hot, as a form of fire energy, very easily recognized and distinguished as a fire type emotional energy, or samskara. The water energy feels wet. The air samskara feels very light and very airy. The earth samskara feels very dense and condensed in this fashion. And again, through your kind of feeling sense. So this is really how the samskaras are kind of manifesting in the body. They're constellating around the elements and a combination of the elements, and then they're manifesting into the kind of higher structures, like, let's say, an emotional experience, or emotional energy, or a mental energy in the form of a particular thought, etc., or a particular physical sensation or something on the body. It's kind of going up at that kind of level, as it were. It's being built at the level of the elements down there at that kind of quantum level, as it were.
that's fantastic. So the 5th element for the listeners is actually ether, correct?
Again, it depends on your system. I mean, the Chinese have got wood and metal, as well as fire, water, and earth. They don't have an air element, for example. Tibetans is roughly similar. So it depends, different systems, different places.
Okay.
Ether in the West would be the Western fifth element.
Okay.
Or quintessence, as known.
Quintessence. Okay.
Yeah, quintessence. Quintessence is like really what's the hidden soul or the hidden spark behind all things, really. What binds it together.
Got it.
I'd like to take our conversation back into the context of our workshop and helping people understand that we can recognize a variety of different types of pain through our body, and that's a great starting point for understanding these injuries that we've occurred and experienced. But if we only focus on the body, we're missing the bigger picture, which truly is in the field around us. That's holding the energetic injury or the energetic distortion that is showing up in the body. Just like fear is a metaphysical energy that shows up in the body as an emotional feeling. So pain and fear relate to each other the same way that the injury in the field does to a dis-ease or to something that's tension or stress in the body. The way that heart math describes our field is they say that our heart, that's made up of 7 layers of striated muscle tissue that has the 4 chambers in it, when blood is pumped through the heart, and blood has properties similar to liquid crystal. If you take liquid crystal and you shake it, it emits electromagnetic energy. So heart math says that as our blood is being pumped through these 4 chambers in our heart, and the striations, the 7 layers of striations in our heart tissue, with the blood being similar to liquid crystal, create an electromagnetic field around us that right now we know emanates at least 8 feet out. No, Paul's not agreeing with this?
No.
Tapping in.
But it's not just from the heart center, you see. It
Yeah.
comes from all the chakras. It comes from all the centers. Yeah.
So it's an interesting way to conceptualize that we literally have electricity that it transcends our body. It's around.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, of course, and of course, certainly within the Chinese culture, particularly, I would say, they've developed an incredibly sophisticated map of the electrical body. It's all its wiring, all its fuse boxes, all its transformational centers, and all its very subtle tertiary and secondary centers, and to a massively significant degree, and and then particularly in the Taoist traditions, talking about the bodies and how they kind of extend outwards, as it were, and how bodies impact upon other bodies. A trauma to a physical body impacts your higher bodies. Your higher bodies being impacted are going to affect your physical body. It's like that.
When I was about halfway through my plant-based journey, it was so hot inside the temple that I was in that I went outside and I rekindled a fire that had been started while we were all waiting to gather to go inside. The logs had burned out, and I got it all going again. And I was standing there barefoot, looking up at the trees, and I saw these rectangular black cubes come down out of the tree that got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I recognized that these black cubed boxes were trying to get me to focus on something really small right in front of me. And as they got really small, then everything around me, I saw connected by these 6-sided, dime-sized pockets of energy. Everything was connected. My breath, the fire, the trees. I literally saw how everything was connected.
Yeah, dangerous net.
And I enjoyed that immensely, because like, oh my goodness, I now see what ether is, or I now see what prana is, or chi is, or whatever that was. But then I had this sense that there was this swirling energy above me, about 2 feet above me, and I looked up, and there was this just beautiful pattern, like a nautilus shell that was moving around above me. And it had about a 2-inch aperture that was closed, like a camera lens closes. And then I got just this impression that I was being told, put your head back down. So my system was all in complete alignment. And then it was like I somehow was able to see up, even though my eyes were looking forward, I could see up. And then this beam of white light came straight down through my head and went out through my root chakra about 2 feet into the ground below me. And as I breathed in, the energy went up. And as I breathed out, the energy went down. And it was literally like I was getting an energetic enema through my whole system.
Yeah.
And that was the part of releasing, forgiving, forgetting, and getting everything all cleaned out. And that's what we were using in our workshop that just came to me. I don't know anything about that. I don't know if it's right, wrong, and different or anything else.
Yeah. This is the central channel. This is the central channel called the Chongmai thrusting channel or central meridian. And, it extends way up above. It's our connection with the pole star, actually, ultimately, and goes very far down deep into the earth. And yeah, of course, this is a very effective meditation. I would suggest, however, as you practice outside of the ceremonial space or outside of the medicine space, is don't take the energy outside of the body to begin with. Leave the energy inside the body. You're running up and you're running down, inhaling up and exhaling down on the inside. Visualizing the Chongmai as a tube, like a plastic tube, around the distance from one pupil to the other pupil is around its diameter. You have that running straight down from the center of the crown to the perineum point, straight through the middle. Breathing up, breathing down, breathing up, breathing down. You can use the hands as well. This is very useful. Moving energy up, moving energy down, just smoothing the channel, running energy up and down the channel. Over and over and over and over again. Very, very powerful practice. All real spiritual traditions are going to have some kind of central meridian practice at some point. They're going to either be utilizing the central channel of the spine in the Kundalini traditions, the Sushumna, or they're going to be focusing on the central meridian in order to move energy up and down. This is a very essential part of inner alchemy. It's a necessary part of the work.
Can you talk just a sec? You're specifically saying not to take it outside the body. Why is that?
Yeah, to begin with, it's not so useful to have a very open crown. To have a very open crown can cause you problems initially. If the lower centers aren't balanced, then you can become very ungrounded and you can become quite kind of, just out there a little bit and not really able to kind of establish yourself in any particular dimensional frequencies so well. So you're not so kind of, committed to the 3-dimensional and so useful in the 3-dimensional realm after that. So better to work with the practice inside the body for some time first. And with regards to the lower centers, well, of course, if you open those too early, you tend to leak energy. You tend to kind of leak energy out of that point. If the perineum isn't worked, it's why in some traditions they have sort of practices of kind of, genital weightlifting, for example, or ovarian weightlifting for women and testicular weightlifting for men, is really to kind of improve the strength of this particular area so that we can release and open it without losing a lot of energy. And, so essentially best to stay within the structure of the body to begin with.
Good. Great, and a really super tip for everybody out there listening in their own meditative practice. Because I think there's a lot of confusion in that regard for people about when they start understanding that they have a field and that they have energy and that they want to start playing with it and they want to start, getting involved in it, and they read books or they go talk to some local yoga guy and suddenly there's, they're going in 27 directions with their energy and their focus, and they, it's really not useful. The trick is keep it simple, keep it focused, and keep it in the body. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, at least at certain stages of the work, obviously the practices change, the meditations change, the alchemical practices change as you go along, but at least you have to have a certain foundation first before you go on to the advanced practices, or you do yourself more harm. Of course, as you say, Jim, the truth of the matter is, the energy body can get confused, if we're trying to, if we're trying to teach it multiple energetic systems at the same time, for example, and the energy body doesn't necessarily know which way to go, so don't practice more than one system, not for any other reason other than you will confuse your energy body, for example, and yeah, if you're doing a particular practice that has an energy flow in a particular direction, you need to know whether a particular other meditation is going to go along with that particular energetic flow. This is why always really the necessity of a teacher within these realms is quite important.
Yes.
Because it is, you're playing with very, when you especially when you get into these deep inner channels, these are called really in the Taoist tradition, the 8 extraordinary meridians. These are the very, very deep inner channels of the body where, very, very fundamental energies are flowing. At these stages, you really need a good teacher because, you are working with forces that are A, very, very powerful, and B, can be quite disruptive if not handled carefully.
Yes, I had firsthand experience of that with you. and forever deeply grateful that I had an amazing guide to help that process, because don't know how I would have navigated that without you.
Yeah, lucky.
Seriously.
Paul, what could you share with us as we're wanting to take the workshop out of the body into the field, the awareness of the field around us? How could you coach us or suggest to us of helping people conceptualize repairing any damage that's in the field? Like a lion eating your leg, or anything that's a spear, any kind of a mortal wound that's went through the field to get to the body. It would seem like there would be some kind of a correlation there, that the field has been wounded as well.
Yes, certainly. I would say there's a little process that needs to take place. I would say there needs to be firstly a process of uncovering whatever energetic blockage or trauma or thing that there is there. It needs to be discovered first of all. It needs to be brought into awareness. I would then say it needs to be felt fully. I think this is an essential stage of the work. If something is not felt fully, it gets repressed or suppressed or continues its manifestation in some way or another. And it needs to be released. And its release is going to have to come about via various mechanisms, I would say, one of which I would say you firmly established. I think we need to go into also, I would like to go into the nature of forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness in that work. And then once that energy has been released, then I think the next stage is to fill the gap, fill that hole up, because there has been an energetic hole that's been created. Now in shamanism, we would go in with our multiple rattles. We would go in with, our male rattle and our female rattle. And we would use our male rattle to kind of uncover the wound and to kind of stir it up and to kind of move it some. And then we use our female rattle to kind of pull that particular energy out, to move that energy out of the field. And then we use our female rattle again to seal the area, to fill it with a particular energy. Because what generally what happens, or what can happen or is likely to happen, is that hole, is that energy you've just released jumps straight back in again. And I think you spoke a moment ago, Jim, about, if you are attached to that energy, yeah, well, the thing is, most people are, of course, most people have developed some kind of emotional attachment to it. It may be on the negative front, but it's still an attachment. They've developed a story around it, or a kind of like, somehow the ego is holding on. In other words, somewhere along the line, it's formed some kind of new identity around that particular trauma. Doesn't particularly want it to go away. So you have another aspect of yourself which desires this to be free, but actually there are other aspects of yourself that is really just calling that energy back into you. And without filling that hole with something else, well, of course, you've already got the space for it. So it just kind of jumps straight back in. So you need to kind of fill up that space in some way or another.
What would you say now, because we talked about the fire and the water, using the elements, how is that what you're saying, filling it with an element or filling it with?
That's a good idea. That's definitely a good idea. I mean, the nature of energy is such that it can be imprinted, so that you can, once you've developed a certain amount of personal energy, you can then configure that energy along various configurations determined by your will. and then express that energy into a person. So, for example, if you sense that, let's say that an area of the body is very, very cold after this form of release, then you can very deliberately configure the energy with your mind, with your intention to be a very fiery energy, and you can put some fire energy in there and kind of fill up the gap until it doesn't feel cold anymore, until it kind of feels full and kind of, you know, warm and complete, and then to do some kind of webbing or weaving over that kind of area just to kind of seal it up in that way. So energy can be configured in this way. So as long as you can kind of like sense it, you know, the secret really is to be able to kind of begin to really, you know, feel, sense and experience energy at deeper and deeper levels until you're understanding each of its different manifestations. You know, the Taoists will say ultimately that there are only 64 different constellates of energy in our particular dimension. You know, there's only 64 ways that energy can be experienced or be constellated or manifest. And, you know, if we can really get to grips with each of those energies, then we can begin to understand how those energies can be transformed, essentially. You know, this is the nature of the I Ching, it's the book of divination, but it's also about the nature of transformation, how energy transforms from one state to another, because that's always occurring. But if we can get a foot in and begin to understand how energy is transforming, what it's going to transform into, then of course we can become much more effective in a healing mechanism for pushing that in that particular direction, you know.
So we have 10 people in the room, and 10 people are having 10 individual experiences of a wound in their field. And we go through the process as we've done so far. They go into the pose, they have the release. Now we want to help them fill. What do you recommend? Because 2 are going to be fire driven, 4 are going to be earth driven, 2 are going to be air driven. What for people who are not initiated to that, how might we as facilitators offer that? Is it to appeal to their innate universal intelligence? Is it to appeal to, you know, like you said, I wouldn't want to just blanket fire across the room, because that's not going to serve everyone. That's actually going to harm some people.
Yeah. I think you have different options. I think there's different ways of going about it. I mean, I think you could take quite a simple model, for example, like the Taoist 5-color meditation, whereby you breathe different colored lights, 5 in all, into the various internal organs. And this is an effective mechanism for filling up the organs themselves with particular virtues. The lights come with their own associated virtues, and also just filling up the energy of the space that we were talking about a moment ago that is left by the release of these traumas. But that's only useful, of course, if you know, if these traumas or energies are arising out of the internal organs specifically. You know, they might not necessarily be so. I think you're going to need to develop a few different models of you know, where this energy is coming from, in order to know how to effectively deal with it as it manifests, actually.
Okay, so that gives us a little homework.
Wow, so much here.
Yeah.
Whew.
So in the context, just so you know, we each have our own strengths, obviously, in the energy we bring to the space and for the people that we're working with. So I heard what you said with regard to that particular approach. I'm also thinking in terms of, in the moment of wanting to fill the wound that has been now excised. We're assuming, based on what we're doing, that we're dealing in the field, not necessarily in the body. Is that a misconception?
I would say it's always going to be, you see, how do you feel it? You have to feel it through the body.
Through the body.
It's felt through the body. It's experienced through the body. So whether or not you want to define it or conceptualize it as higher dimensional bodies or higher frequency bodies or whatever is a little bit irrelevant to the fact that you feel it through the physical.
Okay. So is there a value to Is there a place that you can unerringly help direct an individual's awareness that will inspire that would inspire the choice that they would use in that, like, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to
I
I'm
do.
consciously doing meditation and thinking, okay, I'm going to put fire through my energy because I can
Yeah,
incinerate things. You know,
yeah,
that's my ego probably largely, and lack of experience. So I'm
yeah,
filling in the gaps. But
yeah,
in the situation of a seminar where you have people who may not have that awareness,
yeah. Well, I
what do you
think
think
you're going
will
to need
trigger?
to teach some kind of technique. You're going to need to teach some kind of technique.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Very
actually the elements, everyone can get to grips with the elements. I mean, they're not difficult concepts to understand or to visualize or to even kind of begin to feel inside the body. You know, if you describe there's a scene inside an igloo in the middle of the South Pole or something, you know, people will begin to shiver after a while. You know, they're going to be able to experience it. So we can recreate these experiences easily enough. We can begin to feel these sort of holes with those types of energies. Actually, you know, again, remembering, of course, ultimately that what we really need to do is bring awareness to that particular area. The more we fill it with consciousness, the more we fill it with awareness, the more fill it with mind, the more it fills. You know, it's like you don't leave a gap, because you're not leaving a gap in your mind. Ultimately, you're not leaving a gap in your consciousness. You know, that's where the gap is.
brilliant.
Is the body is the unconscious. You know, what are we talking about when we talk about the unconscious? You know, of course, we could perhaps visualize it as some kind of, you know, crazy storehouse, you know, in the back of our head or something, but really what we're talking about is the body itself. The body is the storehouse of all of these, you know, conditioned energies, unconscious energies, subtle traumas, and, you know, past memory of lives and things like this. That's all within the structure of the body. You know, that's where it needs to be released from. So
Yes.
Well, I have a couple of questions, some regarding my own experience, and then also some as far as what we could honestly tell people in our workshop what to expect, what the benefits would be of attending the workshop. Um, so the experience that I had was very blissful. I had the realization that pain is all in the mind, because my body was completely alleviated of all pain. To the point where it was just like I was giddy and giggling of how good my body felt in years, decades maybe. And then
yeah,
everything was being driven by the mind that was creating tension, pain, soreness, stiffness, acute pain in different places, emotional discomfort, whatever. But after going through these moment of death poses and really focusing in on, say, a neck pain or shoulder pain or a rib pain or something, it left. The pain literally left. And then like the next morning, it came back a little bit. Like we were talking about earlier, if you don't seal it up, it's going to come right back again. So that was something we've learned since then. And we're telling people that this is not a one-time cure. This is something that you're going to have to stay with, like in a meditative practice, like add it to your daily spiritual path to exercise and process pains and discomforts and agony and all of the kind of the negative side of going through life. But I want to believe, there's part of me that wants to believe that this process could be effective for dealing with things like full-on tumors and cancers, that if you did it long enough and you were believing enough, if you had enough childlike faith, that this would be a true way of healing the body, the practice of being able to heal the body. Is
yeah.
that something that we could share with people and be honest about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, actually again, I tend to get rather radical, as you may have realized by now, but I would go as far as to say, you know, the thing is, it's kind of we've got it all the wrong way round. Is the body is in the mind.
Hmm.
You know, the body is within consciousness, not consciousness within the body. So the moment we establish the root in that field of consciousness, yes, of course, anything that is perceived as being some kind of physical manifestation, i.e. the body, can be completely released of all its subtle traumas and injuries and diseases.
Could you spend just 45 seconds even on that? The body is within the mind.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so delicious, and I mean, the words escape me right now, but I would love to hear. You can go on as much as you'd like. I'm teasing about the 45 seconds. I just wanted to hear more of that, because I think our listeners would really benefit from it, and I would love to just that little bit sent my consciousness into places I was like, oh, wait, keep talking, stop.
That's the idea. Yeah, no, I think it's sort of something that Jeff is touching upon. You know, it's this sort of really, you know, what we really begin to understand is when we really begin to penetrate into the nature of mind, into the nature of consciousness, is that things like pain, for example, really are actually concepts. They're concepts in the mind. And, you know, when the mind is settled, then these constructs and concepts settle and kind of release and relax also. Is there's a kind of a two-way street at a certain level between mind, body, body, mind. You know, they feed into each other, as it were. But there is also this kind of like higher sort of understanding or really experience a certain level, but view at another level, whereby the body mind as a conditioned form is arising out of the substratum of consciousness itself. It's not separate from that substratum. It's consciousness and the mind, consciousness and the body are all identical with each other. They're one ground only, you know, manifesting in kind of different ways, but they have exactly the same root. They have exactly the same structure passing all the way through them. They have exactly the same dissolution at the end of that kind of like process, as it were. So when Jeff sort of ascertains that, you know, pain is a sort of like it's somehow within the mind rather than being an actual physical thing. Well, the body itself is also like that as well. It's also basically an idea within consciousness. You know, the idea of apparent physicality or solidity is, as we know, of course, from quantum mechanics now, an illusion, at least at a certain relative level of perspective. And at higher levels, also only a relative level, you know, on a cosmological level, Einsteinian kind of quantum, relativistic level, it doesn't look like it's a solid thing either. You know, you go in one direction, no solidity, you go in the other direction, no solidity. It's only being formed as a result of conscious awareness. It's only being crystallized by awareness itself from moment to moment. It only exists within the mind. The moment you observe whatever thing it is, that thing is constellated within your own energetic field as a thought structure. You look at the mountain is inside of you, it's not outside of you. It forms part of your consciousness. Your consciousness and the mountain are completely intertwined, interchangeable in that way. You can't distinguish between them. In fact, you know, you think it's subjective and objective, but that's just an illusion, in the way that when you're inside the dream state, everything that happens is part of your own consciousness, even though it appears to be subjective, objective. When you wake up in the morning, you realize there was no objective in that realm, only pure subjectivity. Well, it's like this in every realm. There's only pure subjectivity. Everything is only of the nature of consciousness itself, and the body is there too. The body is no different from that.
Wow.
When you said the mountain is inside you, it made me think of the parable that Jesus talked about, having enough faith to move mountains. So if you could recognize that the mountain is inside of you, you can move it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, really once there's a full understanding of the nature of consciousness, you're both a mystic and a magician. You're a magician in the sense that you can manipulate reality because you've understood it to be simply an active mind, and you become a mystic because you realize there's no point manipulating it if it's all an active mind.
Right. So you can walk through a wall if the wall is in your mind.
Yeah. You can go to many caves up in the northern Himalaya, up in Bhutan, up in Nepal and places like this, where you can see very great masters have imprinted their hands directly into the rock, as a manifestation of exactly that. You know, that the material world is nothing but an active mind. You know, there's a nice koan in the Zen tradition, Zen master with a few Zen students, and going up to a flagpole that's blowing in the wind, and the master says to the first student, you know, what's happening? And the student says, oh master, the wind is moving, and he gets slapped because they love to slap people in the Zen tradition. And then, no, this is, you know, incorrect answer. Second Zen students, oh, I know, master, the flag is moving. And master, no, you know, not the Zen slap. And they say, all right, well, what's the answer then? Master says, mind is moving.
Mm.
Ooh. I'm having many moments over here. You are reaching deep into my stuff here. It's quite remarkable.
Where would you encourage us to go in our meditations and our plant-based medicine experiences? I'm anticipating doing one or more before I come see you in May to do the ayahuasca. What would you suggest, knowing the work I'm doing and that Jim and I are doing? Where would you encourage us to go look and explore?
It's very clear to me. It's very clear to me. I would say what you need to be exploring is this very understanding that I've just been speaking of, but to carry through this understanding into the Bardo realms. The Bardo realms are the realms between. A Bardo realm is between any other state. You have a Bardo realm between waking and sleeping, between dreaming and waking, between thoughts, between life and between death. And from death to life, you have a Bardo realm. This is the most important of all the Bardo realms, apart from the Bardo of life, which gives us the opportunity to practice for the Bardo of dying, the Bardo of death. Now, what is the essential teaching of the Bardo realm, of the Bardo teachings? The essential teaching is that it's all mind, it's all consciousness, and not to take any phenomenon that arises in the after-death condition or in meditation or under the influences of the medicines as being objective phenomenon, but to see them very, very directly as none other than consciousness itself. No need to define whose consciousness, but just recognize it as consciousness and consciousness only, mind only, not having any objective reality. Because this is how we get caught up, is the body of karma that has all of these energetic constellates that cause us to create, you know, fall into this cycle of incarnation. What happens is it causes certain visions, it causes certain hallucinations in the after-death state that carry us forward to a particular womb, to a particular rebirth. Now, if we don't get caught up in the illusion of it, if we don't fall into the trap of believing that any of it is in any way objective, but we understand it to be purely subjective and only consciousness, then we can completely liberate. We can be completely transformed in that place. We can become completely free. Take that into the medicine.
Yeah, that's not much. Yeah.
That's beautiful, Paul. Thank you. That's very beautiful. Very, very beautiful.
Welcome.
So as we're digesting and listeners, as you're digesting, just kind of recapping as we're talking about this, not necessarily at the end yet, but you know, we started this conversation and really wanting to have a better understanding of the field and what that means and how it applies to not only the work that Jeff and I are doing, but to those of you that are listening and participating with us. that are on their journey, that are wanting to have a better understanding of why is this impacting? How is it impacting? How can I, me, an individual who may not have a ton of understanding or skill, be able to begin to navigate this process? And I think that Paul has provided some very, very powerful things that you could probably listen to about 400 times and still get new things every time you listen to it. Because it speaks so beautifully and so simply to the core of what we are and why we're here. And Jeff, that's for you, because that's what started our journey together. Sorry.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah. I got to hand off. I'm a little overwhelmed right at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad thing to just feel that, right?
Not at all.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know that I can add anything more either. So,
So, yeah. So take your time with this one, everybody. This is some extraordinary stuff, and we are going to be taking this and incorporating into this amazing new workshop, and we're excited to very gently but strongly step into the world with this process, and letting it unfold in a way that informs and guides not only the people we're touching but ourselves, so that it continues to grow and expand in our foundation of understanding of what we are creating and how we are creating it. And we're deeply blessed and grateful, Paul, for your incredible insight. And I just can't, words are not enough. So if anybody has, Paul, would you like to say anything in closing? Would you like to talk about your center a little bit? I know you're getting ready to have some break, and guys, check out Paul's website. He's at www.tantraya.com, and that's TANTRAYA. There you go. Tantraya.com. Amazing programs all through the summer. Getting to Peru is not difficult. Actually, it's quite easy.
it is. I'll second that.
And a week or 10 days with this shaman will radically alter the course of your experience, without a doubt. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here. You can come see us, www.adventuresinTruthpodcast.com. There's lots of change and lots of beautiful evolution happening, and we're excited to share it with you, and excited that you're on this journey with us. And thank you all for listening, and many blessings and great things to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So long, everyone.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.